All right, get ready, because today we're going deep on something that, honestly, happens more often than you'd think. It's
Yeah,
the road, sometimes a pretty rocky one,
right.
from workplace romance
Mm-hmm.
to accusations of sexual harassment.
Exactly. And to help us navigate this tricky area, we're going back to 1997
Oh, wow, okay.
with an article called Bridging the Gap Between Romantic Relationships and Sexual Harassment in Organizations
Catchy.
by Charles A. Pierce and Herman Aquinas.
Now, Aquinas is that?
Hewing is like the beer Guinness.
Okay, got it. Aquinas. So 1997, romance, harassment. You might be thinking, wait a minute, aren't those two completely different things?
You would think.
Right. And that's actually what makes this article so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
For years, these two issues, even though they both deal with, like, social and sexual dynamics at work,
Yeah.
they were treated as totally separate, like different universes.
Totally. And what this research really highlights is that it's not always such a clean break,
Okay.
especially when we're talking about what they call hierarchical romances.
Hierarchical romances. So we're talking about, like, a boss and their subordinate.
Exactly. When these types of relationships end, they're the ones that are most likely to lead to those really messy harassment claims.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. Help me understand this. Why are these hierarchical romances so much more, I don't know, volatile compared to, say, two colleagues on the same level dating?
All right. Well, imagine this. A workplace romance goes bad. You've got hurt feelings, resentment, maybe even anger, right?
Of course, standard breakup stuff.
Exactly. That's already tough to deal with in any breakup, but now, on top of that,
Oh, here it comes.
imagine you have to see that person every single day at work.
And it's your boss S.
Exactly.
I mean, talk about awkward. And then there's that added pressure of, okay, do I speak up about this? Do I risk my job?
You've got it. That power dynamic, you mentioned the whole supervisor-subordinate thing, it can really easily make a normal breakup escalate into something way more serious.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. The article actually points out that it's often not the romance itself that leads to a harassment claim, but how that romance falls apart
Uh-huh.
under the pressure of that workplace hierarchy.
So we're talking about situations where a subordinate, feeling scorned, might lash out with some kind of accusation as revenge.
Right.
Or a supervisor might try to, I don't know, rekindle things in a way that the subordinate sees as coercive.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. The article highlights a bunch of scenarios that might seem like normal breakup fallout, but can very quickly turn into legal nightmares in a workplace.
Oh, I could see that.
Yeah. For example, a supervisor, maybe they're feeling rejected, right? They might start making decisions about their subordinates' work based on those personal feelings.
Oh, it's not good.
No, maybe they pass them over for promotion
Ooh.
or give them less desirable assignments.
Right, playing favorites, basically.
Yeah. Or even try to avoid any awkwardness by relocating the subordinate or even firing them.
Wow, which could easily be interpreted as discrimination.
Exactly. It's a really slippery slope. In the article, it doesn't shy away from how easily things can get out of control once those personal feelings start messing with professional decisions.
Yeah. What I find interesting, though, is that the article doesn't actually say to ban workplace romances outright.
That's right, it doesn't. They suggest putting policies in place to help manage the potential fallout.
So not like don't date your coworkers, but more like, hey, if you do, here's how to handle things if it goes south.
Exact. One example they talk about is having couples sign contracts that outline what happens if the romance ends.
Oh, interesting.
Like one person moving their workspace.
It's almost like a prenup
Right.
for an office romance.
Right.
So it forces people to actually think about the what-ifs before things get messy.
Exactly. It's all about moving away from that reactive approach, you know?
Right, which always ends up costing everyone more in the end.
For sure. So this is really making me think, if we bring this back to our listeners, what's the big takeaway here?
Yeah, what should people be thinking about as they're navigating their own workplace?
Well, first off, just being aware of this whole thing is key. Knowing that a romance can turn into a harassment claim, especially in these hierarchical relationships,
Right.
that's crucial in today's workplace.
And of course, we have to remember this article was written back in 1997.
Oh, yeah?
And a lot has changed since then, especially with the whole #MeToo movement.
That's such a good point. It makes you wonder, how have those societal shifts changed how we see and deal with these situations today?
Right, like would the advice from back then even hold up now
Yeah.
with everything that's happened?
Mm-hmm.
Or do we need to, rethink how we approach all this? I mean, even just what we think of as acceptable behavior at work,
Mm-hmm.
that's changed too.
Absolutely. And then you have company cultures and how individual power dynamics play into it.
Right. It gets complicated
It
fast.
really does. And it's something we need to keep paying attention to, especially now that the workplace itself has changed so much since 1997.
Oh, yeah, good point.
With remote work and all the digital communication, it adds a whole other layer to these dynamics.
So it's not just an HR issue anymore, right?
Not at all. This is something everyone needs to be thinking about, whether you're an employee or an employer.
Yeah.
Understanding the potential issues here and figuring out how to navigate these situations in a thoughtful way.
Hmm.
It's so important for making sure we have respectful and safe work environments.
Well said. And I think on that note, it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
All right.
But before we do, we want to hear from you, the listener.
Yeah. What stands out to you from this conversation?
What's changed or maybe stayed the same in your workplace when it comes to these sensitive issues?
Have you ever seen a workplace romance go wrong?
Or maybe even been in one yourself?
Right. What were the consequences? We'd love to hear your experiences and insights because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, making our workplaces truly healthy and respectful, it requires all of us to be informed, aware, and proactive.
And maybe a little more cautious about mixing business with pleasure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I think what's really hit home for me is just how blurry the lines can get,
Totally.
between romance and harassment at work. It's definitely not as simple as we might think.
For sure. And with so many things at play, like power dynamics and company culture, and then societal norms changing all the time.
Right.
It's a conversation that needs to keep going, and we all need to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And speaking of keeping the conversation going, we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What are your biggest takeaways from this deep dive?
Yeah. Has this sparked any new thoughts about your own experiences at work?
Maybe you've seen a romance go bad firsthand, or
Yeah.
maybe you've even been in one yourself.
That's right. What happened? What did you learn from it? We want to hear your stories.
Because when it comes down to it, creating a work environment that's truly respectful and healthy, it takes all of us, right?
Totally.
We need to be informed, engaged, and willing to have these conversations, even when they're tough.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep diving deep, stay curious, and hey, maybe sometimes it's best to leave Cupid's arrows at home.
Uh-huh. Good advice. That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for listening.